He'd invited me to cook that dinner. He handed me the keys to his house himself. 90% of you are watching without subscribing, and this story is fire. Let's fix that. Let me go back 6 days. Tuesday. I run a small catering company out of a commercial kitchen in Northeast Charlotte. Nothing huge, corporate lunches, private dinners, the occasional wedding. Lauren, my wife, handles the books. She's a CPA. When we got married 8 years ago, she offered to do the accounting for free. I said yes because I trusted her with everything. Nate and I go back to college. UNC Charlotte, freshman dorms, 19 years of friendship. He went into commercial real estate. Last year, when our old kitchen lease expired, Nate said he'd found us a better space. Bigger, renovated, better loading dock. Lauren handled the paperwork. I signed where she told me to sign. The new rent was $4,200 a month. Nate said it was a deal for the square footage. I believed him. So when Nate called me that Tuesday and said he wanted a home-cooked birthday dinner instead of a restaurant, just 12 people, his place, Saturday night, I said of course. He said he'd leave the key under the mat so I could come early to prep. I told him I'd be there by 3. That was the last normal conversation we ever had. Thursday after lunch, I drove to Nate's house to check his kitchen. I needed to know what equipment he had so I could plan the menu. He was at work. Key under the mat, just like he said. I walked in, checked the stove, the oven, counter space. Took some notes on my phone. On the way out, I stopped at the bathroom off the hallway. That's where I saw it. On the edge of the sink, next to Nate's razor and a tube of toothpaste, a small earring. Gold, with a tiny emerald drop. I picked it up and turned it over in my fingers. I knew this earring. I'd had it custom-made for Lauren at a jeweler on East Boulevard for our 5th anniversary. Cost me $600. The jeweler only made 1 pair. And Lauren never takes off her jewelry outside our house. Never. Not at the gym, not at work, not anywhere. She's kept that rule since the day I met her. I stood there holding it for maybe 10 seconds. Then I put it back exactly where I found it, took a photo, and walked out. Locked the door. Put the key back under the mat. Sat in my truck for 2 minutes. Then I drove to the kitchen and prepped the menu for Saturday like nothing happened. I didn't feel right, and I knew I wouldn't until I had answers. That night, I waited until Lauren was asleep. Then I went downstairs to the office where she keeps the books for my company. I'd never looked through the files myself. That was her domain. I opened the laptop and pulled up the lease for the new kitchen space. The lease was with a company called Ridgeline Property Holdings. Nate's name wasn't on it, but the payment instructions listed a bank account I didn't recognize. I searched the company name and found a state filing. Ridgeline was registered 7 months ago. The registered agent was Nathan Hollis. Nate. I pulled up comparable rents for similar spaces in the same area. $3,000 a month was the going rate. Some were lower. We were paying $4,200. That's $14,400 extra a year, going straight to a company Nate owned, processed through invoices Lauren prepared. I sat back in the chair. My wife was handling the money. My best friend owned the shell company. And someone's earring was sitting on his bathroom sink. I closed the laptop, went upstairs, and lay down next to Lauren. She was breathing softly, one hand tucked under the pillow. I stared at the ceiling and made a decision before she took her next breath. Friday morning, I moved fast. First call, a CPA I knew from a restaurant owners group, a guy named Dale Owens. I told him I needed an independent audit of my company's books, focused on the lease. He said he could have a preliminary report by Monday. I sent him the files. Second call, the building owner directly. His name was on the county property records. Frank Moretti, 72 years old, retired contractor. He picked up on the second ring. I told him I was the tenant in Unit C. He said, "Oh sure, Nate's friend. Good space, right?" I asked him what the actual lease rate was. He said $2,100 a month. I asked him to repeat that. $2,100. Nate was charging me double and pocketing the difference through Ridgeline. Lauren was processing the invoices. They'd been doing this for 11 months. I thanked Frank, hung up, and sat in my truck outside the kitchen. I did the math in my head. $25,000. That's what they'd skimmed. From my company. Together. Third call. A divorce attorney named Whitfield. I told his assistant it was urgent. He called me back within the hour. I drove to his office and signed a retainer before lunch. Friday afternoon, I called Nate's girlfriend, Jess. She worked at an animal clinic across town. Quiet, steady, the kind of person who showed up early and left late. We'd always gotten along. I asked her to meet me for coffee. She said sure. She had a break at 4. I showed her the photo of the earring on Nate's sink. She studied it for a long moment, then looked up and said, "That's not mine." I said, "I know. It's Lauren's. I had it made for her." Jess set the phone down. She didn't cry. Her jaw tightened, and she nodded slowly, like she was confirming something she'd been turning over in her head for weeks. She said, "Thursdays." I said, "What?" She said, "Every Thursday he says he's showing properties late. Every Thursday she says she's meeting a college friend for dinner." I noticed it about a month ago, but I told myself I was imagining things. We sat there for a minute without talking. Then she asked me what I was going to do. I told her, Saturday night, at his dinner, I was going to show him the photo and tell him what I'd found about Ridgeline. She said, "I'll be at that table." Saturday, I showed up at Nate's at 3 with 2 boxes of ingredients and my knife roll. He was under the mat. I prepped for 3 hours, braised short ribs, roasted vegetables, a chocolate torte for dessert. While the ribs were in the oven, I walked to the bathroom. The earring was gone. He'd cleaned up. Smart. Not smart enough. Lauren arrived at 5:30 to help set the table. She kissed my cheek and said the house smelled incredible. She was wearing the other earring from the pair, just one, in her left ear. I almost laughed. Guests showed up between 6:30 and 7. 12 people around Nate's dining table. Jess came early, sat at the far end, quiet. Lauren sat next to Nate. I poured the wine and served the food. Everyone said the short ribs were the best thing they'd ever tasted. Here's the thing Lauren didn't know. That morning I'd found a printout of the Ridgeline lease on my desk at the kitchen, moved from the folder where I'd left it. She'd seen it. She knew I'd been looking, and I knew she'd called Nate, because when he walked in, he looked at me a beat too long. Searching, trying to read what I knew. He thought I'd only found the money. He had no idea about the earring. After dessert, someone tapped a glass and asked Nate for a speech. He stood up. He was good at this. The volume, the timing, the eye contact. He thanked everyone. Thanked his team at the office. Thanked Jess for being patient with his schedule. Then he turned to me and Lauren. He said, "And I've got to give a special thanks to my boy Caleb. This meal was insane, brother." And to Lauren. He paused, lifted his glass. "Honestly, your wife was my birthday gift this year. She pulled this whole thing together." Then he winked at her. Slow, deliberate, like it was a private joke only they understood. Lauren smiled. A few people clapped. I didn't say a word. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the photo, Lauren's custom earring sitting on Nate's bathroom sink, right next to his razor. I set the phone face up on the tablecloth and slid it across with 2 fingers until it stopped in front of him. He looked confused for a second. Then he recognized the earring. Then he recognized the sink. And his whole face changed. The table went silent. I said, "She sure did pull things together. More than you think." Nate picked up the phone, looked at the photo, looked at me. I could see him calculating. How much I knew, how much I could prove, whether this was the earring or the money or both. He tried the easy play first. "Bro, that could be anyone's earring. You're reaching." I said, "Custom made. 1 pair. East Boulevard Jewelers. I've got the receipt. And Lauren's wearing the other one right now." Every head at the table turned to Lauren. She was frozen, her left hand halfway to her ear. The emerald drop caught the light. Nate's face tightened. He leaned back in his chair and went quiet for a second. Then he said, "Look, whatever you think is going on with the lease." Lauren came to me. She asked me to. I raised my hand. "Ridgeline Property Holdings. Registered 7 months ago. Your name on the filing. $2,100 a month is the actual rent. You charge me $4,002. 25 grand in 11 months. I've already talked to Frank Moretti." Nate didn't have a comeback for that one. He just sat there. Jess stood up from the end of the table. She took one look at Nate and said, "I'll pick up my things Monday. Leave the key under the mat. You're good at that." She walked out. Lauren pushed back from the table and followed me to the kitchen. The guests were already reaching for their coats. I could hear someone in the dining room say, "We should go," and chairs scraping on hardwood. Lauren's voice was low and fast. "You don't understand. The lease, that was Nate's deal. He told me it was a standard broker markup. Every commercial lease has one. I processed the invoices the way he set them up. I turned and faced her. You're a CPA? You do this for a living. The markup was double the actual rent going into a company your boyfriend registered 7 months ago. You knew exactly what those numbers meant. She stopped. That word, boyfriend, landed harder than anything else I'd said all night. She tried again. The earring. I went to his house to go over the paperwork. That's all. I must have taken it off when I washed my hands. I said, on a Thursday, when you told me you were at dinner with Kate. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I told her the locks at home would be changed by morning. Her things would be in the garage by Sunday noon. She could pick them up between 12 and 4. Dale Owens was auditing the books. Attorney Whitfield had the separation paperwork. I'd already filed a complaint about Ridgeline with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. She said, "You're destroying everything." I said, "I just cooked dinner. You two built the fire." Nate called me Sunday morning. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Third time he left a message. His voice was different. No charm, no volume. Just flat and fast. He said we should talk before I did anything stupid with the commission. He said the Ridgeline thing was a misunderstanding and he could explain the numbers. He said Lauren had nothing to do with it. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Whitfield. That afternoon, Lauren's sister pulled into the driveway with a rented pickup. Lauren was in the passenger seat. I stayed inside while they loaded the boxes. When they finished, Lauren came to the front door. She looked like she hadn't slept. She said, "Nate is panicking. He says you're trying to get his license pulled." I said, "I'm not trying. The commission reviews every complaint. He can explain the shell company to them." She stared at me for a moment. Then she said, "I made a mistake, Caleb. A terrible mistake. But this, the commission, the audit, all of it, this is overkill." I said, "You stole from my company. He stole from my company. That's not a mistake. That's a plan." She left. I closed the door and called Frank Moretti. Told him I wanted to renegotiate my lease directly. No broker, no middleman. He said he'd draw up a new agreement at $2,100 a month. We shook on it over the phone. Monday morning I sat in Whitfield's office and signed the separation papers. Clean. Simple. One signature per page. He told me the process would take about a year, but the financial evidence would make the division straightforward. Dale Owens' preliminary report confirmed the overpayments. Every dollar traced back to Ridgeline. I drove to the kitchen after that. My kitchen. The one Nate found for us. The one Lauren ran the numbers on. The one they'd both been stealing from for 11 months. I parked, unlocked the back door, and walked in. Same stainless steel counters. Same walk-in cooler humming in the corner. Same dry erase board with next week's orders. I pulled on my apron, washed my hands, and started prepping for a Tuesday corporate lunch. 40 covers. Chicken thighs, herb butter, roasted potatoes. Simple menu. Good food. Work I could trust because I built it with my own hands. My phone buzzed once around 10. A text from Jess. She said she'd filed her own complaint about Nate with the brokerage where he worked. She said a supervisor was already reviewing his client files. She wrote, "He's done." I set the phone on the counter, picked up my knife, and went back to work. The kitchen was quiet except for